Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 94. So here's a quote that I just love from Michael Caine on how he decides to make a movie or not. I look at the script, I read the first page, then I go to the end and I read the last page. And if both pages have the character's name that I am going to play, I do the movie.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by VideoBlocks. Now, VideoBlocks is a subscription-based stock media company that gives you unlimited access to premium stock footage everyone could afford. If you're looking for like extra exterior shots or things that you might want to incorporate into any of your projects, whether that be a narrative, documentary, music videos, commercials, these guys got you covered. They've got unlimited daily downloads from a library of over 115,000 HD video clips, as well as a huge selection of After Effects templates for like opening credits, motion graphics, titles, company logos, as well as motion backgrounds as well. It's pretty amazing. And on average, subscribers pay less than $1 per download in a course of a year. And the content does not get stale. They're constantly adding new content to the library every month. So it keeps it very, very fresh, and you always have something new to look forward to. And everything you download is 100% royalty free. Even if your subscription is canceled, you have unrestricted usage rights for anything you want to do, including personal projects and commercial projects, and you keep whatever you download and maintain the usage rights forever. Now, VideoBlocks is offering The Tribe a yearly subscription for $99. That's $50 off the usual price tag, just for you guys, just for The Tribe. That's less than $10 a month. So to get this deal, just head over to videoblocks.com/hustle. That's videoblocks, VIDEO blocks.com/hustle for this exclusive offer. So guys, I wanted to give you an update on what's going on with This Is Meg. I know this week I was only able to get one podcast out, guys, because believe me, I am so crazed right now in the middle of Meg and editing it and getting it ready in the post-production process. I can't even tell you, but I wanted to give you an update on where we're at. So right now, as of today, we have a pretty close to a final cut on This Is Meg. You know, I moved. That's why I've been so busy. I've been a beast editing and getting everything ready, and everything seems to be working good. I like the cut. I like the movie. I think we're doing some test screenings with a few people to get some notes and see what we can do better. But overall, we're extremely happy about both Jill and I are extremely happy with the movie and how the movie has come out. I've fallen on the floor a few times laughing, but it's a film that has a lot of heart, and it's the exact film that we went out to make. We've made with this movie. So I'm really, really excited to show it to you guys and let you know what's going to happen with it on our journey or through the festivals and through distribution and all those kind of cool things. So definitely keep an eye out and an ear out for all that stuff. And as of course, we will be adding new videos to the micro budget masterclass that I'm doing on the Indie Film Syndicate on Meg. So we're going to be uploading those in the next, hopefully in the next month or two on everything I've been learning and all the lessons on how to do what we've done on This Is Meg. So definitely check that out. Now, today's guest, I was so excited to have Joe on. Our guest today is Joe Menendez. Joe is a film director who's been doing this for a long, long time. He's done a lot of television. He's done a lot of feature films. His current project right now is Nickelodeon's Legends of the Hidden Temple, which for people in my generation will remember that show as a Nickelodeon game show back in the day, which was super fun, but they actually turned it into a live action feature, which is kind of like a mixture between, I don't know, probably like an Indiana Jones style, but for kids kind of film. It's really, really fun, really exciting. And also another thing that Joe has been doing lately is he is a director on From Dusk Till Dawn, this series on the El Rey Network, who, if you guys don't know who owns the El Rey Network and started it, is the legendary Robert Rodriguez from El Mariachi fame. So I wanted to bring Joe on to not only talk about his directing career, but also what it's like to work with a legend like Robert Rodriguez, how he got his shot on From Dusk Till Dawn. And he's worked on, I mean, he's done probably hundreds, if not over 1,000 different episodes of episodic television and shows on TV and features and all sorts of stuff. So he has a wealth of information about the craft and also the TV, working in TV in general as well. So it was just a joy to have him on. So without any further ado, enjoy my conversation with Joe Menendez. I'd like to welcome to the show Joe Menendez, man. Thank you so much, man, for coming on the show, brother. I know you're really busy right now.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And first, before we even get started, I want to say thank you so much for contributing to This Is Meg. That's how we met. You just sent over this, donation to us, and I'm like, well, who's this guy? And I looked you up, and then I talked to Jill. She's like, oh yeah, he's a buddy of mine, and we've worked together. And then we reached out. I reached out to you, and we're like, oh man, we gotta get him on the show. This would be awesome. So thanks again for doing that, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, man. And I'm super excited for you and for Jill. I think it's she's hysterical and a wonderful actor, and I think that this is going to really sort of showcase her talents and what she's all about. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you do as a filmmaker as well, because I've also looked up your work, so I am aware of your work as well. So,
oh my God, you looked me up. I appreciate that.
There's a lot of cyber trolling these days. That's like the moment you're going to meet anybody, you instantly go, okay, IMDb, Google, and then you get in 5 minutes, you get a full background check.
Well, I'm not hard to find, that's for sure.
Yeah, me neither.
I know exactly, right? So before we get started, I also want to talk about how sad it is to be a Miami Dolphins fan for the last 30 years.
And continue to be.
Oh my God, it's depressing, isn't it?
It really is. And every year I do the same thing. I'm hopeful and optimistic, and I think this is the year. I just worked with an actor from Miami. His name is Gonzalo Menendez. No relation to me, but he's a Miami guy. And we had this exact conversation. He said that he treats the Dolphins like he said like a year or two ago that it was like a bad relationship. And they would be in this dysfunctional relationship, and then they would break up, and then they would get back together. And he says that finally, talking about the Dolphins, he finally just let it go and he's moved on. And he tells me, you're in a dysfunctional relationship with the Miami Dolphins, dude. You've got to get out of that dysfunctional relationship. I think he's right. I mean, this dysfunction, I can't help it. I can't quit them. I can't
quit you. I don't quit on me. No, yeah. The thing with the Dolphins, every year, my father, who still lives in Miami, every year, I'm like, I only know about the Dolphins through them because in LA, you don't get Dolphin games. So it's not as all over the place as it is in Miami. And every year I go, how are we doing? He's like, esto horrible, horrible, all this stuff. And then as they win, I hear through the grapevine, they won a game or 2 or 3. Yeah. And then there's that hope. That's the thing. They don't outright suck.
Yeah.
They give you false hope every year. And then you're just like, oh.
They win a couple games, and then you're like, hey, maybe this is – oh, wait, no.
No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see I don't follow them. Every year I just always wait. If they get to the playoffs, I'm turning it on.
Yeah, it sucks because I actually do watch them on DirecTV in my house, and it's
brutal.
Yeah. I don't know why I put myself through this.
No, I was gonna say I'm kind of like your friend. I have one foot in and one foot out. I've kind of left them and made peace with it. But I'm always like, is he dating someone else? Is she dating someone else? That's how I am. I've dumped you, but are you dating someone else?
Yeah, totally.
That's the kind of relationship I have with
Miami Dolphins are my booty call. They call and I go,
So, all right. So this is a filmmaking podcast. So we'll talk about filmmaking for now. So you are from Miami. Did you get started in the business in Miami?
I did. I was born in New York City, but I was raised in Miami. Mm-hmm. And I was one of those growing up that, who made movies on Super 8 film and on VHS from a very, very young age. I got my hands on my grandmother's Super 8 movie camera, and I was hooked. It's hard to explain what the draw was and how that happened and how that was born. It just was. And I was just naturally drawn to it. And I made films with my brother and my cousins and my friends growing up, all through elementary and junior high school and high school, and I went into Miami-Dade. My grades weren't good enough to get into, like UM or anything like that.
I feel you, brother.
Yeah, you feel my pain.
Yeah, dude.
Miami-Dade, which, by the way, Miami-Dade at the time had a fairly decent film program.
Yeah.
And what I liked about it at the time, this was way back in the day, they, as opposed to UM, that you would go in and they were very sort of strict there. They would, you had to shoot on Super 8 and, you had to sort of start from the, and I had already done that. So to me, when I was researching colleges, I was like, God, that's so frustrating going into UM and having to go back to Super 8. I've already done Super 8. I've done Super 8 my entire life. I wanted to do 16 millimeter. And Miami-Dade, from the beginning, let you start, like, by second semester shooting a movie on 16 millimeter, which I did. And so to me, that was exciting, and I did, like 4 or 5 short films on 16 mil, and I learned how to, cut on a guillotine tape splicer back in the day. Like, this was like the days before digital, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm totally dating myself here.
Yeah, I was gonna say for the audience, there was this thing called film.
Celluloid. And I was one of those. I was one of the last, the last generations to shoot on film, and which I'm very thrilled about, and I'm very thrilled that I actually, can now say that I've made a movie on 35, which is, something that just is very rare these days.
Yeah.
But, and then I dropped out. I dropped out of Miami-Dade, much to the chagrin of my, my family. My family, they were all up in arms that I was dropping out, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
Drove out here to Los Angeles, and thankfully it's all worked out and been okay. But, there was a moment when you get out here that, it's like I showed up with, $200 in my pocket and, hardly any contacts. And you
but
just
it was also a different
time.
It was also a different time too. What year did you get out here?
1992.
Right. So it was a different landscape than it is in today's current world.
Yeah.
Without question. The competition was fierce, as you can imagine, but nothing like it is today. And,
well, it's what's different is that nowadays, with the advent of digital video, is that anybody can be a filmmaker and make high quality movies. So it's sort of the garage band sort of aspect of movie making that anybody could become can form a band. Like, okay, you're the drummer, you're the guitarist, you're the lead singer, you're the keyboardist, and boom, you're a band, and you play in your garage. Doesn't mean you're good; it just means you're a band. Nowadays,
that's a great analogy. Oh my God, that's like the best analogy I've ever heard for that. It's awesome.
Yeah, so it's garage band filmmaking. It's like anybody can, like, I've got a camera, I've got a light, I've got Final Cut Pro. I'm going to go make a movie. So doesn't mean the movie's going to be good. It just I think. The cream still rises to the top. So there's a glut. What's different now is that there is a glut of movies. So, like, how do you stand out? How do you make your movie stand out when YouTube and Vimeo, everybody can post their movies? Like, you make a 6-minute movie or like a short or a 15 or even a feature, and you put it up on YouTube or you put it up on Vimeo. How do you stand out? And that's what's different. Back in those days, it was still trying to convince people to give you money, like, or raising, $10,000-$15,000, which is what I did to make my first movie on 16 millimeter.
Well, the barrier of entry back then was, he made one. You made a movie, you're gonna get distribution.
And I got to say that actually happened with my first film, which is not a great movie. I'm gonna admit it right here. But I learned a lot, and and I shot it in Miami. Actually, I went back and shot it in Miami. Mm-hmm. But I think had I made that exact movie today, and had I been 24, 25 years old today and made that movie, it would have gotten lost. It would have gotten lost. It's just, and I think that's the main difference. And I also came in during this, sort of really cool time in, where indie movies were being made by these filmmakers who are now really prominent, but at the
Soderbergh, Sundance, that whole time was 90s.
Yeah, when Kevin Smith and Robert Rodriguez and Tarantino and Alexander Payne and all those guys were all making their first or second movies. And it was a really fascinating time. It was also a time that I would get, amazingly jealous, because I'm like, oh my God, that guy's my age and he's got a 2-picture deal,
Well, I stopped that when I turned 24, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going to be Orson Welles.
Yeah. Totally. We all go through that. We all go through that through that moment of like, I'm going to be that guy that, you know, that, and, you know, and there's a moment, it's an interesting question, you know, to sort of say like, you know, when do you stop comparing yourself to other filmmakers and just start living your own life as a filmmaker, you know?
Right. And it's true. That's the thing I always kind of preach about as well, is that you just got to do you. But at the beginning, you have you don't have a sense of self yet. So
Yeah.
you try to grab onto like, well, Spielberg did Jaws when he was 27. Well, I got to do something by 27. Right. Oh, 27 just went by.
Yeah.
And we all go through it. And Robert was the worst. Robert, and we'll talk about Robert in a little bit, but he was the worst case of that. He's like, oh my God, Robert, he's Latino, he's 23, he made a mariachi. Like, what am I doing with my life?
The thing that Robert did, and I remember that time very, very well, and I actually met him back then, you know, when he was, you know, like just after mariachi, before he did Road Racers, you know. So I met him between mariachi and Road Racers.
Oh, how cool.
This is how far back I remember him. And what I recall, and I told him this when we worked together, is that, you know, I had been making short films on 16 millimeter for the longest time. It never occurred to me to make a feature. Like, I had all the same exact equipment. All I needed to do was just get more film, you know, just get more rolls of film, and I would have made a feature. And to me, it was such an obvious sort of, you know, thing, and it never occurred to me. And this guy goes off and he does it, and he makes this movie, you know, and he's the first to tell you, you know, that he never thought that movie was going to be shown anywhere. He just thought that was going to be like, he calls it, you know, like a film that he thought that he was going to do, learn a little bit, and then go off and make something else. He never thought that was going to be his breakthrough hit. But, you know, the thing that I found most impressive about it was, sort of the chutzpah of like, all right, I'm just going to make a feature. I'm not going to make a short, even though he had made shorts.
He'd made like 30 shorts.
Yeah. But then he just said, "No, I'm going to make a feature." Like, it just never occurred to me. It just never occurred. And to me, that's the thing that, you know, on top of being impressed by the movie itself, I was really impressed by the initiative, you know, of like, well, this is what I'm going to do. And he did it. And, you know, and that sort of inspired all of us to go off and like, well, shit, I'm going to go do that too. You know?
I mean, and to be honest with you, I think that kind of chutzpah or cojones or balls is, I think, almost half the job of being a director. You just got to say you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of that cream that you were talking about changes from the bottom of the cup to the top of the cup, because there's a lot of talented people out there, but there's not a lot of talented people who have the cojones or the bravery to do I'm just going to make a movie. And if I fall flat on my face, I'll fall flat on my face.
Yeah, that's the key. You have to be okay with falling flat on your face. I think there's a lot of talented filmmakers out there, and I've seen it. I mean, I've been out here a very long time, and I've met a lot of filmmakers that I thought were way more talented than me, and yet have gone away and have drifted off. And a lot of it has to do with rejection. You know, the moment they get stung by rejection, you know, they consider themselves geniuses. You know, they go, "Oh, well, I'm a genius." And when people don't recognize their genius right away, they say, "Well, fuck it, I'm out." You know, like, I'm not doing this. Because it's hard. It's a very, especially in the indie world. But even in, you know, when you go into, doing bigger things and in television, it's still just as hard. You know, it doesn't stop being hard. You know, it's a, you know, and you know, rejection is part of it, and you have to sort of, you know, I know it's a cliche, but you have to have thick skin, and you have to let it roll off of you. It hurts, you know, when you're rejected. It really does, but you just sort of go, all right, well, let me move on. You know, I always say, going back to the football analogy, it's like the cornerback who gets beat on a long play. You know, but they always say to a cornerback, you got beat on a long play. You know, guess what? You know, 20 seconds later, they're running another play. So you better forget about the fact that you let that guy get past you. Now you got to stop him again. So it's like, the best analogy is like, all right, moving on. That sucked. That play was not good. This play, I'll redeem myself. You know,
and that's a skill set that has to be learned if you're going to make it at all, without question. Now, how did you get your first feature off the ground, Lords of the Barrio?
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. That's the one that that one would not have. You know,
but that was shot on what, VHS?
No, man, 16. That was
16.
That was 16. Yeah. Wow. It looked like VHS.
Sorry, brother. I didn't mean to.
No, dude.
It must have been the quality that I saw it on YouTube.
I look, believe me, I was my own DP. That's why it looks like that. And
Oh.
but yet that movie got distributed, man. It's out there. You can actually go. I wouldn't, like, if you want to see it, let me know. I'll send you a link. But if you guys want to buy it, it's up to you guys. It's all available out there. But it's I put together money from friends and family, and similar to what you're doing with This Is Meg.
Exactly.
I put together money and scrounged together as much as I could. And, I had access to a 16 millimeter camera, so that helped. And then I was just buying film and paying for processing and doing the film to tape transfer so I can edit. And, so it was
you shot that in Miami, right?
Pardon?
You shot that in Miami?
Shot that in Miami, yeah. Some parts I did some pickups here in LA, but yeah, 98% of it was shot in Miami. And, it sort of, it was like, right now I wouldn't make a movie like that now, but it was very indicative of the time. Yeah. And at the time, everybody was making these sort of violent indie movies with people with guns and, gangsters and all that. That was sort of the trend. And, I sort of fell into that. And what I realized as I've gotten older and as the years have gone on, that really isn't my thing. I enjoy seeing those kind of movies. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily enjoy making those kinds of movies. And I think that, the valuable lesson that I learned from that is, you have to sort of figure out early on, and it's hard because it's easier said than done. What kind of filmmaker are you? What kind of material do you enjoy making that you could see through to the end? And it took me a couple movies. Like, it took that movie and the next movie before I realized, like, what am I doing? These are not my things. This is not my personal taste.
Right. And if let me ask you, what was the budget on the first movie?
Oh my God, dude, it was like 10 grand.
10 grand on 16.
On 16.
How'd you cut it?
On Avid, and which it was but it was not my Avid. I borrowed it. At the time, I was working at the Fox Latin American channel, which was being run out of LA. And I was a promo editor.
Oh man, you and me both, brother. I did promo editing for many years.
Yeah. So like I had, so like on weekends and and in the evenings, like I would run. Like I'd work all day. Everybody would go home. I would stay till like 1 or 2 in the morning, editing, and then go home, sleep 3 or 4 hours, come back to work, like my actual job, and then stay overnight. And they were very gracious. In letting me, it was being run by a woman named Nellie Galan at the time, and she was very gracious and let me use the Avid for free and on weekends and all that. And so, that was the only way to do it for that. I mean, like the 10 grand was literally just to like pay for film and processing and transfer. Equipment and the transfer and all that, and that was it. I would have loved to have done something like it is today, where I could shoot it on a 7D and instantly it's in my computer and I could be cutting and be done, but that wasn't the case back then.
Right. Of course, the technology was much different back then. And I'm sure it was all in standard def, and you probably transferred it to a beta SP.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I may have transferred to digibeta. Maybe.
Oh, it was Digi. Oh, you went up. You were Digibeta.
I may have gone to Digibeta, my friend.
Because you had access to a Digibeta deck at Fox.
That's correct.
That's the only reason.
It was not mine. It was, yes, exactly.
Because those decks used to cost like, God, $150,000. Now you can get them for $15, but
yeah, totally.
Back then. So how did you get started working in television, man? Because you've done, the majority of your work has been television. How'd you get into that?
Well, look, I don't think there's a director working in television that, maybe there's some that exist, but like I think for the most part, all directors, when they sort of think about where their careers are going to be in the future, they're all like, I'm going to be making films, I'm going to make movies, and what you end up realizing, especially in today's age, where it's directing television shows can be just as gratifying. And especially with the immediacy of it, the stuff I just shot from Dusk Till Dawn is going to be on the air in a couple months. Whereas a movie, I could have shot it and it won't be in theaters for a year and a half. And so there's an immediacy in television that's really, really gratifying and exciting. But I made when I moved out to LA, I made a number of short films. And what I did is, this was back in the day where I put everything. I put this one short film that I made called Mother's Little Hitman.
Great title.
Yeah, and it's and it was like, it had like these sort of actiony elements in it, but it had like comedy. It was basically a hitman who was out on his first job, and the ghost of his mother kept nagging him and tormenting him, like, "What are you doing? You can't do this." And very sort of Woody Allen-esque. Like by the way, that's sort of where I started realizing, like, I kind of like the comedy thing. I kind of like, but it's all part of learning what kind of filmmaker you are. But anyway, I sent out these VHS tapes of this short film all over town, where nowadays you would just send a link on Vimeo, right?
Right.
These days, in those days, it was like I would literally have to make dubs on VHS, and there used to be a place in Burbank called Lightning Dubs.
Yeah, I remember Lightning Dubs.
Yeah, you make whatever 25 VHS copies, and anyway, the only company that called me is this place that I sent as a fluke. It was like I had one tape left, and I was like, "Where am I going to send my last tape?" And there was a show called Real Stories of the Highway Patrol, and it was a sort of America's Most Wanted kind of show. It was a show in syndication that basically Real Stories was reenactments of actual crimes. And so the reenactments were super cheesy and like hokey and all that. But I'm like, all right, I got one tape left, and I sent my last VHS tape. They were the only ones that called me, and I was thrilled about that.
Of
They hired
course.
me based on like when I sat down with the executive producer, he had seen the short film, the only one that saw it, like the only one that watched it, or at least the only one that appreciated it. And he looked at me, and I swear to God, my interview with him was like less than 5 minutes. He said, "Yeah, I watched your film. It's not bad. So it looks like you can work fast and work for no money, right?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he's like, "Great. Go out and do a reenactment for us." And that was it, man. And I was, 25 years old.
Yep.
And I was flying all over the country doing reenactments. And, and at first what I passed off as cheesy and maybe some of mine were cheesy. I won't say they weren't. But talk about the greatest film school in the world. I was doing car chases and shootouts and suspenseful things all over the country. And it was getting on TV. So it was wonderful. It was really a great, sort of film school. And from that point on, there was another show that Telemundo was doing like less than a year later, the exact same show, but in Spanish. And I was hired onto that show. It was a show called Placas. And I did 215 10-minute reenactments for that show in the time span of about 2.5 years, which I forget what the count was, but it was like the equivalent of 24 features, if you added it all up. And again, everything imaginable: car chases, shootouts, murders, mysteries, romances. I did all sorts of reenactments, and it was all just whatever would come to mind. I'm like, let's make this reenactment, because we would get actual crimes that we had to reenact, and we had to hire actors, and we had to do it all this. It was all in Spanish. But what I would do to entertain myself and challenge myself and make it interesting is I would say, okay, so this is like the crime was always the same, like burglar breaks into house, murders the family, and now this guy's on the run. Like, okay, how do you make that interesting? Well, you create like a backstory for like the family so that you feel for them, and then here comes the bad guy. You create a backstory for him. So they were 10-minute shorts is how I approached them, and they all varied. Some of them were terrible, but some of them, like to this day, I look at them like, that's not too bad. Nice. And I would like see a movie and I'm like, that was cool. How did they do that? And then like 2 weeks later, I was applying the same techniques on some reenactment that I was doing just to see if I could do it, And so it was the greatest film school. And then right after that, Sony bought Telemundo, and I was always into the comedy thing. I was always somebody that found that appealing and didn't poo-poo in and didn't feel like I was slumming when I embraced comedy. And they started doing Sony. When they bought Telemundo, they opened up their library, and all their classic sitcoms from the 70s were redone in Spanish. And they needed writers and directors that spoke Spanish, but also were American and had American sensibilities, so that they can help sort of bridge the two worlds between an American sitcom and what would become a Spanish language sitcom. And I was hired on that, and those were WGA and DGA shows. And that was in 1999. That's how I got my DGA card and my WGA card. And from then on, it sort of opened other doors, because even though it's in Spanish, it sort of, made people go, oh, okay, he can do multi-camera. Oh, he can do comedy. And, I soon, that sort of opened the doors into the Nickelodeon world, where I did a show called Brothers Garcia for Nickelodeon. And that was a single camera show. And then after that, once I did the Nickelodeon stuff, then it was just off to the races with that. It just sort of all snowballs after that, because then one job begets another job and begets another one, and it just snowballs.
Right. It's kind of like the whole Goodfellas mentality. Like someone vouches for you.
That's exactly right. But that's what TV is. That's exactly what this business is. People, it's like, there's a lot of people, going back to what we were talking about earlier about filmmakers who are extremely talented and have drifted away for whatever reason. Some of it is, they can't stand rejection. Other times it's like, because they're an asshole. And unless you're wildly successful and like your movies make, a shit ton of money, when you're an asshole, people are just looking for the moment they can reject you. And the moment that you stop, so to me, I'm like, it makes no sense to be a jerk, because like, what's the point? Because in failure, they're just going to do away with you right away. People want to work for 14 hours on a set with someone who's pleasant and enjoyable and agreeable to be around.
The Ron Howard method.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think, like it's like, when you read anything about J.J. Abrams, they always talk about his talent, but they always talk about how great he is and what a great person he is to be around. I mean, to me, that's sort of like, I always go, that's the model that I've always followed my entire career is, be gracious and be a good person. And, on set, I'm not a yeller, not someone that shouts, and when things go wrong, don't think I don't get frustrated and annoyed. I do, but you handle it and you don't berate or belittle people, especially when you're the director on a movie. I think sometimes, there are people that mistakenly get the God complex and like, well, I'm a director. I'm sitting at the monitor. And everybody's doing everybody is doing what you're saying to do. Like I want the blue curtains. Yes. Go wider on that lens and all that. And it's easy to go, I'm God. But what you're realizing is what you should realize is that all these people are collaborators, and yes, they want to take download the images from your head so they know what they're making. And crews and cast respond better to filmmakers who are very, very clear about what the vision is. And
Yes.
But what you don't want to do is be the guy that's constantly pissed off and annoyed and not approachable and is a dick and a jerk, because it literally does not bring out the best in everybody. I don't believe it does in any way, shape, or form.
Now, what is your approach to directing a scene in general? Like, what are you more Hitchcock or are you more Cassavetes? Or a combination of both?
Well, I would never compare myself to either one of those guys, but I get what you're saying in terms of style, like in terms
like someone who prepares everything and someone who just flows with it.
No, I'm 100% a planner. I plan, I storyboard, I shot list, I design, I think about what the scene's about, I think about who's the focus of the scene, who's the character that we should be paying attention to. I absolutely design and plan. And I am absolutely ready to throw it all out on set if I have to. And I think that it's both a scary thing, but also a exhilarating thing when that happens. But the only way that I can quote unquote ad lib on set or go rogue or just like is if I have it all planned out. Yeah. So if I go onto a set and I have no clue what I'm doing, where I'm putting the camera, how I'm even approaching a scene, that's where I hem and haw, and that's where I'm lost, and then things don't come out as good. But if I fully plan out a scene, doesn't mean I'm going to shoot it exactly the way I planned it out. Doesn't mean that I'm going to, sit there and go, people, look at the storyboards. This is the shot right here. It's a medium shot. No, there's times that I do that, especially if it's a visual effect sequence or an action scene or something like that. There you pretty much stick to the plan. But I have to go in knowing what the point of view of the scene is and having an idea of this is what I would do. If inspiration doesn't strike, I know that if I did this, it would work. But leaving myself open to tossing it. And I toss it all the time. And I got to tell you, going back to the show Blancas, which is, it was a lame little show on Telemundo that I did, almost 20 years ago. But what I did on that show, on those 215 reenactments, because doing that many, after a while, like I would literally, as an experiment, not plan, There were times that I didn't read. I'm not kidding around. Just to like make myself,
Challenge yourself.
yeah, to challenge myself. I wouldn't read the script till that morning, and I would let people plan it, and I like let everybody kind of plan it, let everybody, like my AD plan it, and then I would show up and at breakfast I would go, "What's this about?" and let someone else. I did that a couple times. I don't recommend doing it. I did it as an experiment, so let me be clear. I don't recommend doing this at all. But I did it just like, what would happen if I didn't know, if I showed up in the morning and I didn't know what I was shooting and someone handed me a script and these are your actors. And I'm like, I want to try that. And I did that on that show. I can't ever do that on any other show in my career. And I knew that at the time, like I'm never going to get this chance ever again. But I got to tell you, that really helps because you're sort of, what it does is it prepares you in a weird way to anything now. Like now in my career, no matter what happens, and there are challenges on everything, like on whether it's From Dusk Till Dawn or whether it's, Legend of the Hidden Temple or whatever I'm doing, there are things that are unexpected that come up. And, you have to be ready to go with it. And if you have that sort of experience and that sort of knowledge, if you have craft. I was telling someone yesterday, I'm editing the season finale From Dusk Till Dawn that I just did. And the post PA on the show wants to be a director. She's really young. She's like 22 years old. Mm-hmm. And I happen to ask her, like, oh, what do you want to do? She's like, I want to be a director. And then she was like the post PA sitting out at a desk out like in the bullpen. And I just said, well, I'm sure you've been sitting in with directors, right? And like, picking your brain. She's like, no, nobody's let me. And I'm like, get in here and sit down and observe. Don't say anything. Just listen. And, and so she's been in there. And what I told her yesterday, and it's funny that we're having this conversation, I said, I think there are 3 keys, I think, to being a director. You have to have taste. You have to have taste, so you have to know what's good and what's bad. Mm-hmm. You have to have craft. So you have to understand how to craft a scene as a director. And you have to trust the feels, is what I always say. Yeah. You have to feel. You have to feel it. You have to because sometimes you don't want to make a decision based on intellect. You sometimes make a decision based on what it feels like. My favorite story is when Spielberg was making Close Encounters, he told everybody, I want the mothership to rise up from behind Devil's Tower. And everyone was like, well, wait a minute, it's the spaceship. Wouldn't it come down from the clouds? And it should come down and land behind Devil's Tower. And he's like, no, the way I see it in my head, the way it feels right, is to see it rise up from behind Devil's Tower. And that's how they shot it. And it's one of the most iconic images in the movie. Yeah, and it's all because it felt that way. It felt that way to him. He felt that that's the way to do it. And I think you got to trust the feels. You got to, have craft, and you got to have taste.
Without question, man. Now, what you've worked with a tremendous amount of young actors. Do you have any advice about working with younger actors?
Well, I mean, what what it's always worked for me is to never treat younger actors like children. You treat them like adults. Okay. When you've cast this kid, and hopefully you've cast a kid normally, with rare exceptions. Kid actors are oddly very adult-like. They're still kids, and they still do things that are kid, and sometimes you have to be kind of dad, and you kind of have to, hey guys, and you have to kind of scold them a little bit. But I would say for the most part, a kid like Isabella Moner, who's the lead in Legend of the Hidden Temple, who I worked with on another Nickelodeon show that she was the lead on, I would talk to her like I would talk to any adult and direct them. And now, if there was anything that was confusing, and I would always ask, does that make sense? And if it didn't make sense, then I would reword it or rephrase it. But for the most part, I found that if I just spoke to them like adults and didn't treat them like kids, it wasn't like I was, getting down at their level and putting my hands on my knees and going, children, listen, here's what we're going to do.
Right.
It like, you just tell them like, this is what the scene is and this is what I need from you, and some kids need more talking to than others. Isabella was one of those, for instance, that got it immediately. Like Isabella is one of those there's like 3 or 4 kids that I've worked with in my career where I've gone, this kid is remarkable. And Isabella is one of those, just stunning in how she is able to process like an adult, even though at the time she was 14, she just turned 15. And it's, but you cast it right. If you cast a kid, and normally these kids that are doing this are usually, if they want to do this, they're usually mature beyond their years, typically. right? You know,
Generally speaking.
Yeah, the immature kids don't want to be actors, or like if they do, they suck. You know, and
Right.
you can weed them out in the casting process. You kind of know who the sort of old soul kids are, you know, when they come in for casting. And then once you've cast it right, you know, and again, it's always 80% of it is casting. Don't treat them like children, you know. And by the way, sometimes you have to make them aware that when you're doing a show where there's a lot of kid leads, is you kind of have to every now and then remind them, like, you know, all these adults that are standing here, all these crew members, they're all depending on you to hit your marks and to say your lines. And I think that it's okay if a kid's gonna come into sort of an adult situation like a film set, they have to kind of understand that there's a responsibility to it, and they can't just come onto the set and fuck around. And you know, most of these kids understand that, you know, hey, all these people here are depending on paying their mortgages. They're all depending on you to know your lines and to, you know, you very rarely have to remind a kid of that. Very rarely. I mean, I've done it in my, 16, 17 years doing stuff with kids. I think maybe once or twice I've had to like scold a kid and reprimand the kid because for the most part they get it. And usually, but I think that's the best way to approach a child actor is to not treat them like a child.
So now we're going to get into the question I've been dying to ask you since I discovered who you were and looked up your work. How the hell did you get the gig from Dusk Till Dawn?
Well, how do you call it? Carlos Cotto, who is the showrunner on From Dusk Till Dawn, who's the head writer on the show. Robert sort of, it all starts and finishes with Robert. It's his network, it's his show. But Carlos Cotto is the guy that's running the room. He's the guy that's writing all the scripts, and he's the brains, if you will, behind the writing of the shows. Obviously, everything always, like I said, starts and stops with Robert. But Carlos had seen a film I made many years ago called Ladrón que robó ladrón, which was a movie in Spanish that I did for Lionsgate, a heist movie. Yeah. And he came out to a screening of it and really enjoyed it. One of the actors brought Carlos out, and I met him after the screening, and he shook my hand and he said, like, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. And, he talked about my one-ers. He's like, you do a lot of one-ers, man. You can't do that in television. You can't do one-ers in television. You gotta, and I'm like, I know, I do television. I know, I wouldn't do one-ers. Although, interestingly, I got him and Robert to sign off on a 1.5-minute one-er on the season finale From Dusk Till Dawn, which I'm not going to tell anybody. You got to see it. But they let me do like a cool 1.5-minute one-er on the season finale. But anyway, as he's walking away, he tells me, Carlos, gee, Joe, I'd love to work with you one day. And, people say that all the time. And you kind of go, all right, well, whatever, thanks. And I didn't really think it was, anything serious, but I was appreciative that Carlos had said that. And anyway, turns out that his kids growing up watched a lot of the shows that I had done for Disney Channel and Nickelodeon. So he'd be watching Disney Channel or Nickelodeon with his daughters, and all of a sudden he'd see my name. And like, I Joe, I know that guy. And he would write me. It's like, hey, I just saw an episode of Zeke and Luther that you directed, man. It was really funny. And I'm like, oh, thanks. So we stayed in touch. And then he emails me, and he, out of the blue in 2013, and he's like, hey, man, what are you doing? I'm running From Dusk Till Dawn with Robert. Love for you to come on. And I was like, great, of course. That'd be amazing. And he goes, but you got to interview with Robert. Obviously, Robert is the one that's signing off on directors, is essentially, understandably, right? So we set up Skype, interviews, because he was in Austin, Robert was, and I was here. And we interviewed. I think I interviewed with him 3 or 4 times. And he would ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, like how does that go? Like when you say interview, like, because I understand one interview, but like once you've interviewed a person once, like what are the next 3 interviews about? Like different questions.
It was specific to the episodes, because so the first interview was getting to know me, like who is this guy as a person? Do I like him? And that kind of thing. And obviously he had seen my work, he had seen my film, and we talked a lot about the fact that I had done a number of kids shows, and but if there was anybody that understood being able to go back and forth between these two sort of genres, as him, having done Spy Kids and Sin City, he and Desperado and all that, he obviously understood all that. That a director could could jump between worlds and still be able to tell good stories. Like he understood that more than anybody. So you get past that. I got through that interview and we got along really well. And then I read the outline for the episode, and he treated it basically like a feature. Like I was interviewing for a movie. So it was, even though it was an episode of television, every interview was giving him my take on how I would do it. And then I would say, well, I would do this, and this is what I see, and I like this, and how about this? And then he's like, that's great. And then the next one was like, here's the script. Read the script now. Like, tell me what you would, And then so it was basically getting into the minutia of, and essentially this 1 hour of television was treated like a feature film. And I had to, and because Robert was the network and the studio, and although it's Miramax, it all, like I said, it all started and stopped with him. And he eventually got to a point that, he said, clearly you have a vision for it. Clearly you have enthusiasm for it. You're not intimidated by it, that was the end of that. And, and I got the job. And, the thing that he said that he, after I had the job and I got to know him, he said, what I liked the most about you was that you didn't fixate on the horror aspects of the show, even though, those are all visceral and that's fun to do. And it's fun to do those kind of set pieces with visual effects and, scary stuff and all that. I was more focused on the characters. I wanted to know about Richie Gecko and about Seth Gecko and about Santanico and about, the Fuller family, about Jacob and Kate and Scott. I wanted to know what made them tick. And, because I always say that, you can have all the spectacle you want, but if you don't have characters that you care about, then it won't matter. The spectacle won't matter, and it won't land, and it won't play. And I think that was sort of the big selling point that I always fixate, and I do this on everything I do, whether it's Dusk or whether it's movies or anything I do. I spend a good amount of my prep figuring out tone and characters. And then once I've got that, then it informs how you block and how you stage and where you put a camera. Like if you know what the focus of the scene is and why are characters, you almost have to kind of break it down like an actor and kind of understand it so that it'll inform everything. So I think that was the big selling point. But it just got into the interview process was getting into the minutia and getting into the weeds of how I would do it, because obviously I was an unknown to him. So,
sure, of course.
But, with each subsequent conversation, he got more and more comfortable and understood what I wanted to do. And I understood what he wanted, because of course he was also downloading to me things that he wanted to see. So it was a good blend of things that I do and things, that he wanted to see and what Carlos wanted to see, because Carlos was also was also very obviously instrumental in telling these stories in a certain way. And it sort of was born from there.
So is the show run very Robert Rodriguez style?
Well, it's only in the sense, the thing is that, you go work for a director of his caliber, and there's always a sense of, like, oh my God, I'm working for Robert Rodriguez. It's like, is Robert going to show up and say, do things my way? And I cannot tell you how wonderful and filmmaker friendly Robert is. Not just to me, but to every director. There isn't a director on these shows that wouldn't say the exact same thing. Now, obviously, Robert did the movie, and he did the pilot. The first two episodes which were essentially the setup of the movie. So when you go into television, it's not your job to go in there and reinvent the stylistic choices that were set up in the pilot. It's your job to look at that and study that and go, oh, I see what they're doing. Like you can't go on to, for instance, a show that is a fully handheld show that's gritty and sort of, cinema verite, and decide to make it all slick techno crane shots, because, then you're reinventing the wheel. Then you got to go in there and sort of adapt to what's been set up beforehand. So you go in knowing that there are things that you want to do that are very Rodriguez-esque, right? But it's not a mandate. It's not like he's sitting here going, make sure that you have this and you have that. He's very, very good about, asking each director to bring in their own thing and bring in their own sort of style and their own vision. But what every director that does the show knows is like, but Robert Rodriguez is the one that set up the look of the show. We'd be stupid not to bring in Robert's, stylistic choices and elements into it. So oftentimes I'll shoot things knowing like, oh, and by the way, working on the show has also sort of informed my own style, because you kind of are always like, what would Robert do? And you kind of have in your head, you're always thinking that. So like, I'll shoot things and I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. And then it can't help but bleed over into your own style. And what's happened, having done 6 episodes now, is that you don't even think about it anymore. It just sort of becomes like you just sort of do it almost naturally now, because I've done so many of these now that now it's sort of instinctive, that I can never, duplicate what Robert does. Robert is very specific, and he's got a style all his own that is, unmatchable, and you can't, compete with it. So you still have to sort of come in and do your own thing. But when you see the show, there are definitely moments and angles and, the way things are cut, like you also know that, give them certain elements and certain pieces and shots that could be cut in a certain way, the way he likes to cut things, and because oftentimes Robert will go in there and the final pass on each episode will be by Robert. Robert will physically take each episode. And, like my first episode, speaking of the first episode, I did this gunfight, right? Which was supposed to be like on the US-Mexico border. And when I turned in that gunfight, and I'm, having done a number of action scenes myself, I'm like, I was feeling pretty good about it. Like I turned it in, and I turned in my director's cut, and I was like, that's pretty badass. I don't know how this is going to get topped. That dude has grabbed all my footage. It's not like he went out and shot something new, all right? Robert grabbed my footage and cut that scene in a way that I did not see, and just made it 1,000 times better.
Wow.
And it was remarkable for me to see what that man could do with my footage. Like, I thought I knew that footage backwards and forward. And I'm like, oh, he took that element and he put it there. Wow, I would have never thought to do that. And that's what's fascinating. Is to sort of because from a process standpoint, he's like super quiet and super low key, but like when you watch him on set, he sits there and he's like super cool. He's got like a guitar and he strums, but that the gears are turning while he's strumming out a tune, and then all of a sudden he's up on his feet and like he's like changing things, but he's like so quiet that you try to listen to what he's saying. You're like, I can't hear what he's saying. God, I just want to get closer. But but when I'm in the chair and he's in the back row, completely respectful of the process, so encouraging and so complimentary. When he loves something. What he tells you is when he likes something, he'll go, that's badass. When you get that's badass from Robert Rodriguez, you're like, all right, good. I'm good. Life is
good. Yeah. You were telling me that like he texts you during episodes that you're directing and things like that to see how you're doing.
He does. And, he's how do you call it? He's very good about texting and encouraging you and telling you that things are looking great and all that. Like I said, I mean, he obviously he has notes and comments and will give you feedback and all that. But he's very good about like just sending out a text and telling you how cool something is. And you're and it's because you don't know when you're like I'm putting forward my best effort and then you put it out there and you kind of wait and you're like, okay, good. Validation. All right, good. But he's but not just with me. He's very good like that with everybody. That's why I say obviously I'm gushing over Robert. I can't say enough nice things about him.
No, I mean the guy runs his own network, and he's a director, and I mean I can only imagine a day in the life of Robert now, just like having to deal with all of that. But I guess he's just been after almost 25 years now since Mariachi was released, he must have built up this ability to just kind of run an empire, which is what he does. He just kind of and he doesn't seem nervous or beat up about it. Like you're saying, he's on set strumming a guitar. Like, oh, okay, let's go do this.
I have never I mean, I'm sure he gets I'm sure he gets frustrated. I've never seen it, and every time I see him, like it's like he's always calm, always sort of soft spoken and very kind and all that. But yeah, he's this last season we were in Albuquerque, but the first 2 seasons we were in Austin, and we were shooting in his building. And his building, Troublemaker Studios, is awesome because it's like a filmmaker's. I mean, you would love it, dude, because you would go down there and it's like, yeah, this is set up by a filmmaker, and you can tell.
Yeah.
He's sort of like if you imagine Disneyland, where like the castle is the center, and then everything sort of spreads out from the castle out.
Yeah,
that's kind of how Troublemaker's set up. Like his office is like in the center of the building. And he's got a couple doors in his office, and he can go out one door into editorial, one door into like the conference room where the writers and the directors are, and that same door takes you to the studio, to the stages, and everything sort of flows around where he is, and it's just great. Like you go in there and you're like, yeah, this was set up by a filmmaker, and you can tell it was set up by but he's got like he's got 2 sound stages, he's got a back lot. Upstairs he's got an entire art department and visual effects team, and so there were times that my office in Austin, the director's like the prep office was right next door to his, literally right next door, like walk out of my door, walk into his door, and oftentimes he'd be running a meeting about the network, and just like nothing phases him. I mean, he's seen it all. He's been around for 20 plus years. There's nothing he hasn't seen.
Right. He's worked on major studio movies, and he's done as indie of a movie as you can make. So he's seen everything in between as well.
Yeah. Now he's making a humongous movie with James Cameron.
Yeah, I heard he's doing. Is he doing
Alita: Battle Angel? Yeah.
He's doing Battle Angel.
Yeah. They're shooting that I think in October. So
Battle Angel's been Cameron's baby, but he's all up on the Avatar.
Yeah, that's right. And he passed it off to Robert, which is an indication that someone like James Cameron would pass off his baby to someone like Robert. It sort of says it says it all.
Because James Cameron is James Cameron.
That's right.
I mean, there's only one guy, and that's James Cameron, no question. Yeah. Just out a quick question: how many days is a shoot? An episode? Do you get to shoot?
It depends. It's between 7 and 8 days. An episode.
For an hour of 45 minutes, or
about 43 and change or something like that. So I did the penultimate and the season finale. So I had 15 days to do 2 episodes. But what's great is that they were such massive episodes that Robert came out and did a Splinter unit, and there's which of course like is super exciting to see him grab a couple of these scenes, and he did this one scene that is completely badass with Seth Gecko that I don't want to say, but it came out so cool that they're actually rushing it through special effects, and they're going to run it as a promo on the network. Because it's such a cool sequence, and I can't wait for everybody to see what it's like. It is classic Robert Rodriguez kind of stuff. So you'll see when it comes out. I'm going to totally post it on Facebook and all that because it's so cool.
And I mean, obviously Robert was a big influence on you.
Well, I absolutely. I mean, I certainly admired his career and his trajectory and everything that he's done and accomplished and his success and and his movies and his filmmaking style. But my big influence were it was Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis. I mean, I grew up in that era where those guys were making like brand new movies. Like I'm old enough to remember when Star Wars was a brand new movie. Like I was 7 when Star Wars came out. And like to me, I remember like Star Wars, so I always say to people that I kind of feel like I grew up during a very cool era when Spielberg and Lucas and Zemeckis and all these guys were making these movies, Joe Dante, they were all making these movies. And it was what have become classics, and to have grown up in that era. So that's really been my influence is those guys, that generation, the generation before me and Robert, because me and Robert are the same age.
Right.
So really, if you want to talk about influences, it's those guys. And then before them, I'm actually a film enthusiast. So like I love Michael Curtiz and Otto Preminger and William Wyler and those guys. Delmer
Preston
Dave.
Sturgis and those.
Yeah. I mean, those. So Orson Welles. Obviously, these are all filmmakers that that I've loved and admired as well. So, the thing with filmmakers that are in your generation, like a Robert or like a JJ or people like that you admire them, and obviously there's things that they do that you're like, oh my God, that's so great, and you learn things that they're doing. But I always say that the influences, for every generation is always a generation before it, So
yeah, without question. And I'll take you back. You were saying all the Joe Dante and Spielberg and Zemeckis. Would you have loved to work on Amazing Stories?
Oh my God.
Wouldn't that have been the coolest?
Amazing Stories came out, man. I was like 16 or 17 years old when Amazing Stories came out. And I was like, obviously way too young to even be considered, but
of course,
but like they were hiring, they hired like Phil Joannou, who must have been like 23 or 24 at the time. So not that much older than me. So like I missed that window. Like, not that I would have, who knows? I probably wouldn't have gotten hired anyway, but you just like say like, I wasn't even like old enough to be like even in the conversation. And like, I would have loved to have done that. And I always say like, anthology series don't get their just due. I think anthology series are kind of cool and like they don't get made enough, Oh
no, and yeah, for everybody in the audience, look up the show Amazing Stories, which was Spielberg. Spielberg produced this anthology series.
He directed a couple episodes. He directed Ghost Train and
Ghost Train, yes,
and The Mission.
The Mission with Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
With Kevin Costner. It was such a great.
Kiefer Sutherland was in that as well.
Yeah, Kiefer when he was young, before he started kind of blowing up. Yeah. That was such a wonderful show, and I always remember my favorite episode, and I'm going to geek out for a second. My favorite episode was the episode that this dorky teenage kid found this goo that if he poured it on pictures, the pictures came to life.
Oh,
you remember that episode?
I do. I'm trying to remember.
Then and he kept pouring it on the girly magazines. He wanted a girlfriend, but if you pour too much, they become these huge monsters. If you pour too little, like half a woman would come out.
Yeah.
And it was just brilliant. And at the very end, I'll spoiler alert. At the very end, he finally gets the girl, walks out, but then as they close the door, the goo spills on top of like a horror magazine, and that's just the way it cuts off. And you just like, oh, that's so great.
There was also I also love the Zemeckis episode. Go to the head of the class. That Christopher Lloyd was in it, and like they spoiler alert that he's like this ruthless, awful teacher, and at the end, like all the students, they cut off his head. And then but at the end of the episode, he's like a monster and he's managed to sew his head back on, and the episode ends with him unraveling like a scarf and you see the stitches around his neck and like he's somehow sewn himself back to it's great. It's the Robert Zemeckis one is pretty fun too.
Those are things that just, oh God, I wish there was stuff like that around today. Yeah. But I hear Stranger Tales is preting good, that new Netflix show.
I'm 2 episodes in, and it's very good.
Is it really good? I haven't gotten there yet. I'm binging some other shows.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. I want to see where it goes. I definitely curious to see where it goes. No, but it's really well made, really well done.
Now you just you're going to be doing a new movie. You've mentioned a little bit in the podcast, Legends of the Hidden Temple.
I did. I shot it. I shot it in Vancouver earlier this year. We're in post. We're doing visual effects and all that. It's based on a game show from the mid '90s. Yeah. And what Nickelodeon decided to do is basically bring back Legends of the Hidden Temple, but as a movie, but not as a sort of cheesy kind of movie and campy. It's like to be played straight. Right. And it's like a kids Indiana Jones movie,
like Goonies kind of.
It's a Goonies kind of thing. There's humor in it for sure, but when I read the script, I wasn't really sure which direction they were going to go in. I didn't get any sort of indication. My agent sent me the script, and I was going into similar to what I did with Robert. I had to go pitch my take, and it's like it's an interview, but it's specific to the project. And I went in there and I pitched my take, and this is what I would do. And then, but my opening sentence was, this should feel like the movie that for the very first time in Nickelodeon's history, they kill off a kid. Like you should feel like a kid's gonna die, which would never happen.
Of
obviously.
Of course.
But it should feel that way. And like, they were like, yes,
Yeah, there has to be
so,
that threat. There has to be that.
the peril has to be real. It has to be real because, the greatest Disney movies, classic Disney movies, and even like Disney movies that, that have come out in recent years, when moments of danger happen, the moments of danger are played for real. And
Pinocchio. I mean, Jesus.
Yeah. Kids, are surprisingly resilient. I have a 10-year-old and, she can handle, I mean, there's certain, obviously like she watched like all the Jurassic Park movies, right?
Oof, wow.
And like was fine, like didn't freak out. And then I'm like, you're ready for War of the Worlds. And I showed her.
No.
20 minutes in, she was sobbing. She's like, turn this off. So I'm like,
dude,
okay.
The guys are being burned alive.
I cannot tell you how often, like during like that day, just my wife giving me dirty looks all day, like, what is wrong with you? But like, I thought she was like, I thought she was ready. But like, there's a line, right?
Yeah.
Jurassic Park is like right where that line is. It's like there's dinosaurs and like,
it's
and
something
like,
they can recognize. At least they're like, oh, it's dinosaurs, so it's all make believe and stuff like that. But when the aliens are burning,
no, it's also done stylistically. Even though they're both Spielberg, Jurassic Park is done in a way that it's scary, but you kind of know that it's like movie scary. Whereas like War of the World is so realistic.
Oh god,
so,
it looks like news footage almost.
Yeah. So that's sort of the approach. The approach was like we're going to make a movie where like when the kids are running and they're running from the temple guards, you should feel, like, oh my God, they're going to catch them and they're going to do something horrible. And, but then like but it's a kid's movie. It's being told or a family film, and it's being told from the point of view of the kids.
Right.
So they're going to get away. They're going to do, these great heroic wish fulfillment things. But it's, but the way I approached this movie was, and it's the biggest movie Nickelodeon's ever done. They're super thrilled and excited about it. And I'm super thrilled and excited to be part of it because it's the kind of movie that I wish I was 10 years old and seeing this movie, because it's the kind of movie that I would love, but it's also got stuff for the parents, because oftentimes I watch a lot of these kids movies with my daughter, and there's times that I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Watching these things. There's very few family films that my daughter watches that I could sit with her and watch them.
Right.
And, most of the time I'm like, oh God, I want to be doing anything else but sitting here right now. But
trust me, I've got twins. I know.
Yeah. Oh, you have twins? Yeah. So yeah. But yeah. So this is the kind of movie that I thought about us, the parents. And so there's enough of it that like parents will appreciate. But then there's this other core audience that we're also attracting, that are people who are about 30 years old now, who grew up on the game show.
Yep.
And it's sort of nostalgia for them. So there's a lot of stuff that we did in the movie to pay homage to the fan base that was 10 when the game show came out, who are now like 30, 31 years old, 29. So it was a challenging project in the sense that we have to, make sure that it works for the core audience first, for the kids, but also be something that the 30-year-olds will appreciate and that parents will appreciate. So it's like literally like three audiences, that we had to make the movie for.
Now, that's funny. I actually have my own Nickelodeon story. I worked as a PA on Global Guts.
Oh my God.
Back in the day, I was in Orlando going to film school, so I got an internship I actually paid a PA job, and I like years later got contacted by guys who were obsessed with like, do you know where that mountain is? Like, there's a huge fan base for those old Nickelodeon game shows.
Totally, 100%.
Huge. And they're like, we're making a documentary about Guts. Would you be interviewed? I'm like, dude, what are you talking? What?
Yeah. It really is, and. It's funny because, a few people have reached out to me and have told me like, oh, why didn't they just bring back the game show? And, and I'm like, if the movie's successful, they could bring back the game show. But how cool is it? Because, because I mean, I missed, like I knew of the game show, but I was of a generation that I had just missed it. Yep. So by the time the game show came out, I wasn't watching Nickelodeon. I wasn't anywhere, but I was young enough that I was aware of it. And I remember even thinking like, oh, that's got like an Indiana Jones vibe. you know,
Yeah, it was cool.
and
It was a cool show.
like the idea, like the idea to turn it into a movie is sort of the same concept, like Robert making a feature on 16 millimeter. It's like, what a cool, obvious idea. Like, take that world and write a story and put these real characters in it. I mean, what a great idea. And so that's what we've done. And I'm super excited about it. Visual effects are coming in hard and fast and every day. Like, it's great. Like, it's like Christmas every afternoon. The visual effects company sends me shots, and it's Christmas every morning. Like, I mean, every afternoon I open up and I'm like, oh yes, look at that shot. All right. Because right now, like, it's like the Avid version. Which
I know that feeling when it's wait till it's colored and
yeah. Although our editor, this guy Damon Fecht, who cut the movie, is actually a former visual effects editor, and so he did actually a really great job of temping these visual effects. Okay. But now that we're seeing them like really done, by the visual effects company, it's really fun to see it. And starting next week, I'm going to start hearing the music, so I'm excited about that. So we're in that stage where it's in post, where I'm not going to say the hard work is done, but it's the part, you know what I'm talking about, Alex.
Yeah,
it's like we're not in pre-production, we're not in production. In pre-production, you're like, it's the stress of like,
what's going to happen,
casting and like planning and designing, and then shooting, as you know, it's got its own sort of like, oh my God. And then editing is like, am I an asshole? Did I cover this right?
Yeah. And then, dude, I'm in the middle of that right now.
Yeah. And then once you're done editing and it's locked, this is kind of the fun part. To me, this is now where it's like, now your collaborators are sending you all these cool things, and like
you're
this is like
dressing her up. You're cleaning her up. You're dressing her up, getting her ready for the ball.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite part of the process. Although I love being on set and I love the shooting of it, which people think that's crazy, but I actually do like the process on set. But I think this is like, in terms of my nerves, this is probably my favorite part. Because it's like the part where I just get to see things and go, wow, that's cool. All right, yeah. And like give notes when something isn't quite right, but for the most part, largely, it's been fun.
So now, of course, you're going to be doing Double Dare the feature soon, right?
I can neither confirm or deny.
That would be a very, I think, much more difficult movie to translate.
Yeah.
To a narrative. So, all right, man. So I ask my guests these questions all the time. These are the core questions I ask of all my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker just starting out today? Know
what kind of filmmaker you want to be perceived as. Because, and what does that mean? Oftentimes as filmmakers, especially when we're young, we're like, I want to tell stories that change the world and are riveting and all that kind of shit, right? What really studios and agents and people, or people that hire, what they want to know is they want to know what kind of filmmaker you are. And I think one of the challenges that I think even continues a little bit to this day with me is that my body of work is wildly eclectic, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't really say I'm this or that, I've done things in Spanish, but am I a guy that does things in Spanish? I've done stuff in the family world, but am I a guy that does family stuff? Now I'm doing, 1-hour dramas. I've done East Los High for Hulu. I've done obviously Dusk Till Dawn. I've done, some TV movies. It's like so I think what is a challenge for me is like, I think now I'm at a point where people kind of understand that I'm versatile and I can jump around. But I think, for someone starting out, however, it's kind of say, okay, because I think the mistake I made, and I think I was talking about this early on, and I think I made these two sort of indie movies that were the flavor of the month. It's what was popular at the time, mm-hmm. and I enjoyed seeing them. I didn't realize I didn't like doing them. Not that I didn't like doing them, but that I didn't get as much of a thrill doing them. And what I should have done, and this is what I always tell people, is I should have said, what kind of movie do I want to go see right now? Like really like that I want to like, that I love. And for me, I would have said, even like what hasn't changed in 30, 40 years for me is that I love seeing like Spielberg kind of movies, like the Amblin movies from the 80s, things that have a little bit of humor, but like have some mystery and some,
Adventure.
some fantasy, adventure. Yeah. I shouldn't have done these like dark indie dramas that I did, my first two movies. I thought my third movie, Ladrón was a bit more me. It had a little bit more me in that it had humor and it had action. And so people early on want to figure out like, oh, you're a horror guy. And I know that there's filmmakers that say, I don't want to be pigeonholed.
Right.
Let yourself be pigeonholed. You could break that later, but it's good to be known as the guy that does X, because then you work, then you're employable, then you're someone that people go, oh yeah, that guy's good at horror, that guy's good at comedy. When you're kind of all over the place, like I was early on, it's hard to kind of pinpoint you. And so you kind of, I've only, what's happened now that I've come full circle, I've done so much stuff that I can sort of chameleon my way into any kind of genre, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But that's sort of what you would call journeyman status. You sort of become a journeyman kind of in that sense.
Like Scorsese could do almost anything. Spielberg could do anything.
But initially, though, Spielberg was known as the creator of, kids' fantasies. Scorsese was known as doing like Mean Streets kind of movies. Like they all started off as like they do that kind of thing. Now, in recent years, they've expanded and now they do different kinds of things. But it's okay to label yourself, but when you label yourself, it better not be flavor of the month. It better be something that you really love doing because it'll show in the movie. And I think when I look back on my first two movies, I think the biggest, just briefly, I'll give you the story. My second movie is a movie called Hunting a Man that's also available. That's also been released.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it as an indie drama, right? The ending of that script, when I started shooting it, was a very dark ending, right?
Right.
It was like, it's like people get killed and it's tragic and these two brothers never talk to each other again and it was awful and tragic and that's a script that we started doing. At the last second, I chickened out and I was like, I can't end a movie like this. Like, I hate this. This is not me. I'd rather everything be okay and like the family come together and it's lovey-dovey. And so I changed the ending and I felt better about the movie, me personally, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened is I was depending, when you make an indie movie, frankly, to get into like the prestige festival,
sure.
like a Sundance or like a whatever. Those kind of festivals don't like the happy ending movies. They want the dark. So like I didn't know what my audience was. So what happened is I shot myself in the foot. Had I kept the darker ending and had I kept the more fucked up ending,
mm-hmm.
the movie would have maybe gone farther. I'm not saying the movie is the most brilliant thing in the world, but I think had I been more savvy and had somebody told me, dude, you're depending on that crowd to legitimize your movie. You need to make the movie that crowd. The mistake was I shouldn't have been making that movie to begin with because that wasn't my movie. That wasn't my kind of thing. Like I should have been making a family film from the very beginning is what I realize now with, something adventurous and fun with like.
Those guys always work. Always work.
I should have been doing that. Like I wish somebody would have told me back then, that's your thing. And by the way, people did tell me that. People did tell me, you should do more like comedy family stuff, Joe, early on. And I remember like being like indignant, like, how dare you, sir? How dare you?
I am an artist.
That's right. And then and it's bullshit. And so all you're doing by saying that is you're creating a scenario where you're not going to work. So let people label you earlier, but let it be a label that you want them to label you as. And then later on, once you've had success, then you can break out and do other things. I've done it backwards. I started doing different things from the very beginning. And I think that it was hard at first for people to figure out. And to a certain degree, it's still like people look at my diverse credits and they're like, okay, wow, you've done a lot of different things,
Yeah, they don't, from my understanding, people in Hollywood, they don't like to think. They just want to go, you're in this box.
But
in this box.
But why is it that you got to but they're going to put you in a box regardless.
Right.
You might as well be the person building the box and putting yourself in the box. Like, this is the box I'm in. Like, you might as well be that person. So that's my advice.
Okay.
Other than learn your craft and, learn how to make a movie, right? Figure out what kind of filmmaker you are. You got to know what kind of filmmaker you are because otherwise, no one's going to want to figure it out. People are just going to want to know.
So, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in life or in the film business?
To stop comparing myself, like in the film business, to stop comparing myself to other filmmakers, like Robert, or like for the longest time, it was like what we talked about earlier. Bringing this all back full circle. Looking at filmmaker X at the age that I was at and going, oh my God, by the time this filmmaker was this age, they had already done this and that. As opposed to being grateful for where I was and what I was doing, I was, antsy and agitated that I wasn't where that guy was or that woman was. And what you realize is but right behind me, there's somebody looking at me and going, well, gee, I wish, I was doing what Joe was doing, So, what has taken me a long time, I guess it's both life and in my career, is realizing how good you have it, because even you, Alex, right now, I know you're making your movie and you're like, I'm going to make my movie and I'm not going to wait for somebody to make it. You're making your movie, dude. And that's something to be grateful for.
Yep.
People from out of the woodwork came and they donated and they funded, and you're making your movie and you're out there doing it, dude. And so, as opposed to lamenting, like, why am I not making the romantic comedy for Universal? Instead you should say, I am so grateful that I'm making This Is Meg with Joe Milian. And that's sort of what I've done now with my life. I'm grateful that I'm doing From Dusk Till Dawn and Legend of the Hidden Temple and Stuck in the Middle, and that I did Ladrones and Ladron, and I've done all the TV movies that I've done. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And I think that that's the hardest thing to just be good with where your life is and accept it.
And also enjoy the journey, I guess, as opposed to the destination, which I know is cliche as hell, but it's a lesson that took me a really long time to learn.
That's right. And because it's not over. It's not like, I'm like, all right, I'm done. The journey continues,
Yeah, I know. It's not like, well, I worked with Robert. I'm over. It's done.
It's okay to have ambition and to have goals and desires and like, oh, I want to be there and I want to get to that point and I want to do that. And, we all have that. But there has to be a moment that you have to go, shit, I've done this and this and this, man. And I'm grateful and I'm happy for that, and I'm going to continue to do X, Y, and Z and where it takes me, that's the other thing is that, and I think, and it's all connected, that I would make something and then I would set myself up for expectations. I'm like, well, I'm going to do this and it's going to do this and I'm going to go there.
Yep.
And then the movie comes out and it lives the life that it's going to live. And you kind of look around afterward and you're like, well, that didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out. So you can either be angry and bitter about it, or you can evaluate and examine why it turned out the way it did and then move on and don't make those same mistakes, or don't go down that same path on the next one.
Can you imagine someone like James Cameron, who worked all his life and he gets up to Titanic and has the biggest movie of all time? What do you do at that? Like, that's a goal of a lot of filmmakers want to be that popular.
You do Avatar.
No. But he didn't. He went off and like, you know what? I'm going to become one of the biggest explorers, underwater explorers in the world. And I've got the money to go do it. I'm going to go take 8 years off.
Yeah.
And then, oh, by the way, I'm going to come back and make Avatar.
Yeah, which will exceed Titanic and make even more money,
Like we were saying earlier, there's one James Cameron.
That's right.
Nobody.
But I'm sure that, when James Cameron was working at Roger Corman, he was looking around and going, why am I not Steven Spielberg? Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he's like, I'm good. I'm working for Roger Corman, for Christ's sake. I mean, this is awesome. So I think that's the key, I think, is to sort of be grateful as to where you are, because, you may not be where you want to be just yet, but you're at a place where other people aren't. And so you have to kind of take it all, it's all relative. Right. It really is. And then, I what I'm trying to do, now with my career going forward is not go in with any specific expectations on any given project. So, when I'm doing a movie like Legend of the Hidden Temple, I of course want it to be wildly successful and I want people to see it and I want people to really enjoy it and all that. But beyond that, I don't have any specific thoughts in my head like I used to, where like, okay, so it's going to come out and then I'm going to get a phone call from so-and-so, and then so-and-so is going to invite me out to his house. I'm not doing that anymore because I would make myself crazy with scenarios. And like,
I mean, I already have a scenario for you. Like, I'm going to make Legend in Temple. Then Lucasfilm is going to see it. They're going to call me in for an interview for the next Indiana Jones, and then I'm going to like.
But that's how you drive yourself crazy. But that's how you drive yourself crazy.
Yes.
Like, obviously, if Lucasfilm calls anybody, any filmmaker, I don't care who you are.
Yes.
Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy calls you and says, "Hey, I want to talk to you."
Yes.
It's a defining moment for any filmmaker. I don't care who you are. And if you say it isn't, you're a liar.
Absolutely.
It's like everybody's going to take that meeting.
Of course.
Everyone's going to take that call. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
like Steven Spielberg calls you. He's like, "Hey, I'd like to have coffee." Yes.
You're gonna take that call. You're gonna take that meeting, and you're gonna really be like, "Holy crap!" I don't care who you are. You're a liar if you say that you don't care.
Exactly.
But you can't drive yourself crazy because when afterward the phone doesn't ring and Spielberg or Kathleen Kennedy doesn't call, you can't drive yourself crazy. You just got to move on to the next thing.
Exactly. Now, this is the toughest question I'll ask you the entire episode, the entire interview. What are your 3 favorite films of all time?
Well, that's not tough at all.
Okay.
I actually, my number 1 and 2 fluctuate depending on the day. But right now, today being the 28th of July, when we're recording this, it's E.T.
Okay.
Then Raiders.
Okay.
And then Die Hard.
Oh, Die Hard, the best Christmas movie of all time.
Best Christmas movie of all time. I still play Run DMC. Hollis and Christmas as like that's on my rotation during Christmas when I put my playlist and I have all the Dean Martin and all the other Christmas music going on. In comes Run DMC with Christmas and Hollis, and it's like bam 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 bam. It's like of course, and I think of Argyle in the limo going, "This is Christmas music."
No, it is Christmas music, but it's not Christmas until Hans is falling off the side of a building.
That's right. Yeah. So those are my 3, and I think it's what that list, and I used to be kind of embarrassed by that. I'm gonna lie to you. I'm gonna be like, oh my god, I'm not like You
don't have Seven Samurai or a Bergman movie or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's that's the other thing that now as you get older, you just don't give a fuck, about how people perceive you. You're just like, that's what I like. Fuck you. I don't care. You can like
Wanda Sykes.
3 movies you like. I don't care. You don't like these. I don't care. These are the 3 movies I like. These are the ones that I will watch and I will enjoy and I will study. I think those 3 movies sort of sum up my tastes and my likes and the kind of filmmaker I'd like to be. I mean, and so be it.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's as Wanda Sykes, comedian Wanda Sykes says, like, as you get older, you just give less of a shit. And it's true. She's like, do you ever see an 85-year-old out there really caring?
No, yeah. I was driving down Ventura Boulevard the other day, and this, like, he must have been like 85 years old. This old man, like, wheeling a grocery cart. Like, I felt bad for him. He was, like, really slow. Like, there was a Ralph's, and he was crossing the street, and he had to cross the street. Just right in the middle of the street, right in Ventura Boulevard, no light. He's just, I'm crossing right here. And, like, guess what? We all stopped.
Of course. He's like, either it's time for me to go or it's not. I'm just going to cross here.
And so we all, like, everybody, I looked over at the other cars, and we all, like, shrugged. We're like, he's 85.
Or you get away with that. Yeah, if he's 25.
If it was a 25-year-old, I'd be like, dude, come on.
Yeah, you'd get out of the car, probably beat him. I mean, like, dude, seriously? So, where can people find you, Joe, online?
I am on Facebook. Okay. So, Joe Menendez, and or my website, joemenendez.com, all sorts of crap that about me that, like, I'm even like, that's a lot of crap about me on joemenendez.com. But there it is if you want to see it.
Joe, man, I thank you so much, man. This has been a wonderful interview, and you've dropped a lot of knowledge bombs to the Indie Film Hustle tribe, man. So I really appreciate it, brother.
No, thank you very, very much, man. This has been a pleasure. It's been fun, and it's been good talking to you and getting to know you.
All right, man. Thanks.
All right, dude.
I hope you liked that one, man. That was so much fun. Sorry about all that Miami Dolphin talk at the beginning of the interview, but when you get 2 Miami boys together, this is what happens. So I hope you got some information out of that, man. I was fascinated about how he worked with Robert, and I'm a huge fan of the From Dusk Till Dawn series. I really love what Robert has done with the mythology, that him and Quentin kind of came up with on the feature. And if you guys haven't seen it, I'm going to put links in the show notes, which the show notes, of course, will be at indiefilmhustle.com/094. I'll put links to the series as well if you guys want to check that out. It's a fun show, and Joe's done a ton of episodes for it already, so it's definitely check it out. So, Joe, thank you again for being on the show. Hope you guys got a ton of information and knowledge bombs out of that interview. So don't forget to head over to freefilmbook.com. That's freefilmbook.com to download your free film audiobook from Audible. It's awesome. I've downloaded a few books from there, actually a handful of books there, and I listen to them while I work out, and it's really, really good. Always furthering your education is key to being a successful filmmaker. And if you want to keep updated on all stuff Indie Film Hustle, definitely join our Facebook group, which is now getting close to 6,000 members. It's growing like crazy. So all you have to do is head over to indiefilmhustle.com/Facebook. It's free to join. Just jump on in and you'll get access to a lot of cool Indie Film Hustle knowledge, information, articles, podcasts, things like that. So definitely check that out as well. And I want to give a big shout out to all the tribe members who have been emailing me over the course of the last few weeks about Meg, about how the podcast has really helped them and grow. And I got a wonderful opportunity to meet a handful of the tribe at that Holly Shorts event that I spoke at. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, guys, thank you so much for all the kind words. And I'm so glad that this podcast and everything I'm doing on Indie Film Hustle and at the Indie Film Syndicate is of service to you guys. And first and foremost, regardless of anything else I do, I want to be of service to my fellow filmmakers and my fellow artists. And if anything I can do in my small way can inspire or help you guys, it just fills my heart up with joy. It's wonderful. But no, seriously, guys, I'm really humbled by all the well wishes and also just the emails and the messages and things like that you guys send me. So please keep those stories coming. I really love reading about what you're doing, and if you're starting a new feature or you just finish a short or things like that, write me an email. Let me know what's going on. If you join the Facebook group, please, you can post in there and share it with the rest of the tribe. So thank you again so much from the bottom of my heart. Appreciate it, guys. As always, keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.